Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang Dhammang Sanghang Namassami. Good evening, everybody. Nice to see you. Nice to be back in Kuala Lumpur. It's been a while. How many of you have been to Bodh Gaya? You raise your hands. Have you been on a pilgrimage? Yeah, most of you. Very good. So, those of you have probably studied, many of you have probably studied the life of the Buddha, and the period of time immediately after his enlightenment is very instructive. The weeks after his enlightenment, when the various contemplations that Lord Buddha was doing, so he practiced the middle way. He had insight, Lord Buddha had insight into the Four Noble Truths. And please don't take pictures of me while I'm talking. No pictures, no pictures. Sorry. You will see the fierce emanation of Ajahn Achalo. So Lord Buddha, as a bodhisattva, was practicing at the Bodhi tree, and he had his insight into the Four Noble Truths, which is the insight particular to teaching Buddhas in the human world. Then, after his enlightenment, it's said that he would abide in the liberated state. And then, when coming out of that liberated state, attending to the khandhas, he would consider various things. So on one of those weeks, he was contemplating the dependent co-arising, for example. But there are other occasions where he was in awe of what he'd realized, what he'd accomplished, and he wondered, how did I do this? How did this mind come to be completely free of suffering? How did it come to be liberated immaculately? And then one of the lists that he shared with us is the 5 spiritual powers. When made much of, when cultivated, lead to the deathless and merge in the deathless. One of my favorite lists of dhammas. So you have faith, energy, mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom. So just these 5 things, if you want to keep it simple. Ajahn Sumedho, when as a junior monk at Wat Nom Papong, when he was studying with Luang Por Chah, he used to use this as a kind of a mantra, Sattha, Virya, Sati, Samadhi, Panya. And he would ask himself, are all of these qualities present in my practice? Are they balanced? Because if when they're balanced, when they're all present, that's when we have a very powerful practice, and that's when we will tend to be able to progress. If some of them are weak, then we may not progress. But on a subsequent week, again, Lord Buddha experienced a liberated mind, and coming out of that state was contemplating, how did I accomplish this? And then he saw the 4 foundations of mindfulness, when cultivated, made much of, lead to the deathless and merge in the deathless meaning nibbana, the unconditioned. So that's a huge hint, suggestion, pointer to us about the function and the power of mindfulness. So what is mindfulness? Since we have this teaching from Lord Buddha, what is mindfulness? So that capacity that you have to be aware, And in the four foundations of mindfulness, aware of a form as a form, that's your body, that's your form, conventionally speaking. Aware of feelings as feelings. Your knee pain, your back pain, your rapture, your peace, all of these things are feelings. Then you have your citta dupassana, the content of your mind. So, mindfulness has a quality of discerning more truthfully. So we have a mind that is affected by ignorance. Because of ignorance, there is delusion. So what is ignorance? Ignorance is not knowing the truth, not seeing clearly. Because we don't know the truth, there is a misinterpretation. That's delusion. The problem with delusion is it doesn't announce itself as delusion. We are deluded, but we often think we're right. That's delusion. Now, mindfulness helps us have more presence of mind and more clarity. And having more presence of mind and more clarity, sometimes described as truth-discerning awareness, then we begin to develop more understanding of what is a wholesome Dhamma, what is a neutral Dhamma, and what is an unwholesome Dhamma. So, for example, a quality like self-righteousness, because there's a feeling of a self who's right, it may never have occurred to us in the past that maybe we're wrong. Because I have a big feeling of being right, so I must be right. So many of you here are in an age bracket where you have children and grandchildren and nieces and nephews. And I'm sure that some of them are not living their lives the way they should. Is that right? And I'm sure that sometimes when you come to meditate, you think, why does my son do this? Why is he marrying her? Why is he not marrying the other one? Why is he getting a divorce? Why didn't he finish his degree? He should have done this. He shouldn't have done that. Why is my daughter-in-law like this? And why is my nephew like that? Why is my cousin like this? Why, etc., etc., etc. Why are the politicians like this? They should, and they shouldn't. So we develop a bit of a sense for these kind of phrases and what the mind does. Certain things to be mindful of is when we start to think, how come they're never grateful, no matter how much I do? Okay, how come they always complain? So we have to develop a sense for a big sense of self having a big reaction, probably not wholesome. Even if there's a feeling of being right. So when we have mindfulness and we're trying to be aware of the breath, this is why breath meditation is so wonderful. You're trying to be aware of the breath, but there's a thought there, there's a reaction, and there's an opinion. But in the process of trying to be mindful of the breathing, you get a bit of more of a sense for how it feels. And then when you practice more, it's like, actually, this isn't wholesome. We begin to be able to take more responsibility for whether our mind state is wholesome or not wholesome. One other interesting list to refer to is the upakilesa. I won't go through all of them, but one of them is contentiousness. So it's like, and I remember living when Ajahn Viradhammo was at Amaravati. When I was a novice, I was there for 6 months, and Umpa Viradhammo was being the abbot at that time, giving Lompo Samedo a break. And a practice that he did was that he would tell himself, do not contend. Don't be contentious. And it's another very simple thing to remind ourselves. It's like, when you look at Ajahn Samedo, so much of the emphasis of his teaching is like, when you come to sit, it shouldn't be like this. It should be like this. Ajahn Samedo's response, it's like this. And so these great bhikkhus with decades of experience, they learn skillful means to kind of cut through the habits of the mind and to help themselves be with the meditation object. So that's the problem with delusion, and that's the problem with self-righteousness, is that it will take us away from our meditation. We have a story, the way things should be, the way things shouldn't be, what people should do, what they shouldn't do. We all have these habits. But when we're trying to do breath meditation, trying to put that down. But in the process, it's a very good thing if we develop more discernment about what a trustworthy emotion is, and what a trustworthy reaction is, and what contentiousness feels like, and what non-contentiousness feels like. A large part of what can help us to be peaceful, of course, is an understanding of the law of karma. And then also an understanding of I was talking earlier with some old students about parents who had children and certain qualities they saw in their children that they did not get from their parents or their parenting. That it became clear to them that they came in with certain inclinations and habits and tendencies. Like, for example, somebody's daughter wanted to study classical singing from the age of 6. I remember my niece, her mother wasn't my dear sister, but she wasn't a particularly feminine or she's a lovely person, but she's kind of dynamic. She likes African drumming and African dancing, and she's a bit of a hippie. But her daughter, from the age of 6, is like, "Mom, can I study ballet?" And her mom's like, "Why do you want to study ballet?" "I don't know. I like pink. I like the dresses." It's like, this had come from somewhere else. We do need to contemplate this. We need to contemplate that our children are not ours. Our grandchildren are not ours. Our nieces, our nephews, our cousins, our parents-in-law, they're not ours. Every being is faring according to its karma. Every being has its latent tendencies, conditioned by, the previous billion lives. So sometimes these aspects of right view, conventional right view, there is karma, there is rebirth. There is liberation from this. But in conventional reality, this is the way the matrix of samsara, the cycle of rebirth, works. So sometimes when we want to be contentious, it should be like this, it shouldn't be like that. It's like, well, you might not be arguing with that person's opinion that they formulated this life, or that person's quality that you don't like that seems to have manifested in this life. That person might have been like that for 500 lives. Do you get that sense sometimes? You're talking to them, but you just can't get through. The way you see it, they just don't see it that way. But this is because we all have different styles of delusion. One of my monk friends, when I was a junior monk, he was talking about neurosis, and he says one of the ways he learns to practice with his and other people's neuroses is just to consider that as that person's style. So again, he was like learning a way to be not contentious with people around him who seem neurotic. Coming back to the 4 foundations of mindfulness and how we practice them. So when you come to sit, the wonderful thing about breath meditation is you're giving the feelings of the in and out breath your interest, but the body's there. You're trying to be aware of a feeling of an in-breath, but there might be a pain in the knee area, a pain in the shoulder. And so we're also learning about the nature of the body. It's full of painful and pleasant feelings and neutral feelings. Trying to be aware of the breath, and a thought comes up. A thought about the past, thought about the future, thoughts about other people. So you're mindful of a thought as a thought. This is one of the tremendous values of doing formal meditation in a formal posture, is that during that time you're going to relate to thought differently. You're setting the intention to relate to thought differently. So while you're practicing mindfulness of breathing, you're just going to see a thought as a thought. Not I, not mine. Not my future, not my past, just a thought. And this is very powerful. It sounds very simple, but it's very powerful. Because what we don't realize, this is the power of our habit, is when we think about the future and we think about the past, we're actually creating a self in a world. And a self in the world has what? Suffering. First noble truth. You will meet with things you like, you will meet with things that you don't like, you'll be separated from things that you like, you'll have to be with things you don't like. But when you give your interest to the breath, and you just see a thought as a thought, and you allow it to arise and cease without grasping, you're stopping building a world for that period of time. You're stopping making karma with a sense of self. You're just allowing a form to be a form, and a feeling to be a feeling, a thought to be a thought, not I, not mine. And the benefit of it is that a quality of clarity and presence of mind grows through the act of being mindful of one object, not giving the interest or attention to the others, not running after others, just in that coming within the parameters of the body. Clarity, presence of mind, samadhi, some collectedness, the mind gathers. Lord Buddha gives examples in the suttas, wonderful examples of how important keeping this mindfulness within the parameters of the body are. There was one occasion where one monk wanted to see where samsara ended. That monk was especially gifted with his psychic powers. So he traveled to the end of our galaxy, to the end of the universe, into another universe. He went so far he actually got lost and he met another Buddha. And that Buddha had to send him back. He gave him directions to get back to your universe and your Buddha. But he told him, this is not the way. Samsara doesn't have an end. The conditions have no end. The phrase is the Ananta Jagawan, the unending universe. He said, go back and ask your Buddha where the universe ends. And then the Buddha says, within this fathom-long body is where you have to put an end to suffering. Again, that's a huge teaching, is what's going on here that causes you to suffer. And when you practice your breath meditation, you should be able to see that. It's your craving for. It's your craving not for. It's your wish that things were other than the way they are. Causes you suffering. And when you can be with an in-breath, and you can be with an out-breath, and you can just allow the body to be a body, the feelings to be feelings, mind objects to arise, stay for some time and cease without grasping, you will have much less suffering. And this quality of clarity, this quality of presence of mind gets more clear, more present, more profound. Again, there was another example of may have been the same bhikkhu. I'm not very good at remembering names, but I remember the story. So the story was, a monk was thinking, I want to see if the end of suffering comes from going like as far as I could possibly go in heaven. So he's going up through the heaven realms, realm of the four kings, Davatingsa, the Yamadevas, the Tushita, the Paranimita, up and up to the Brahmas. And the Brahma's like, what are you doing, man? And he's like, I'm trying to find the end of the universe. I'm trying to put an end to suffering. He says, your teacher's the Buddha. He knows, go back and ask him. So, to the highest and most subtle heaven? No. To the end of the universe? No. This is what a self trying to find an answer does. It will go on and on and on, and more and more and more extreme. And then back to the Buddha, and the Buddha says, do not try to find the end of samsara in the conditions. Find consciousness with no showing, where the four elements find no footing. So he's saying, in your mind, if you come inwards enough with enough mindfulness and enough clarity and enough samadhi, you can experience something where the four elements can't stick. That's where your liberation is. But how are you going to perceive that? How are you going to experience that? How are you going to experience a mind where no four elements stick? You can, but you're going to need a lot of mindfulness. And you're going to need samadhi. And you're going to need wisdom. Sati, samadhi, and panya, the forest masters talk about it all the time. And if you condense it and make it more simple. Mindfulness in all postures consistently gives rise to samadhi, collectedness. Wisdom, what is wisdom? If you want to understand it simply, contemplate the three characteristics. Anicca, dukkha, anatta. That's what mindfulness sees. Mindfulness sees impermanence. Mindfulness sees unsatisfactoriness. The mindfulness is truth discerning awareness, and the three characteristics are the truth. But if mindfulness is good, and there's some collectedness, and whatever is arising, you're seeing it, letting go of grasping, seeing it, not identifying with it, seeing it coming inward. That's when the path factors can converge. The path factors are conditions. They are conditions that lead to the unconditioned. Even mindfulness itself is a condition, sankhara. But when it is the condition, as Lord Buddha had the insight, it's the condition that leads the mind to glimpsing and experiencing the unconditioned. So we must depend upon it, and we must cultivate it. So this is where the formal meditation is very helpful, because this is where you clarify your mindfulness, strengthen your mindfulness, deepen your mindfulness. And a lot of people say, well, I just practice being mindful in all postures. And I'm like, really? Because I don't do formal meditation. Often this teaching is taken as an excuse. I don't do formal practice because my whole life is my practice. Really? Another dinner, another anniversary, another graduation, another engagement, another divorce, another death, another funeral. That's your practice. And I'm not convinced. You definitely can be mindful in all of your postures, but if you want to be, you have to do formal practice. Because otherwise you have weak mindfulness in all your postures. So the benefit of sitting in a formal posture and taking one thing as your object, the breath, is that's making your mindfulness good mindfulness. And yes, you have to be mindful in all of your postures. So at the end of your sit, you set the intention, I intend to be mindful throughout the rest of the day. How do you know if your mindfulness is good mindfulness? This is your test. If mindfulness is good, when an unwholesome mind state arises, you can know it and let it go. That's how you know if you have really good mindfulness. If your mindfulness isn't so good, you're having a reaction, you're feeling grumpy, you want to respond, maybe you can restrain yourself from speaking on a good day, if you have some mindfulness. But if you're having a reaction, if you're grasping a reaction, if you're about to speak, you know you shouldn't, but you still speak, this is not good mindfulness. Okay? But if you are diligent with your practice, and you cultivate good mindfulness, training in formal meditation with meditation objects, especially the breath. Walking meditation is also good. You're aware of those feelings at the bottom of the feet, that presence of mind in the present moment. If we can do that once a day and then increase it twice a day, many of you are retired, I can see. So you can do it 3 times a day. Then you will have good mindfulness. And then you really will see that you're mindful of your mind states as they arise. And that you know if they're wholesome, neutral, or unwholesome. And you will be able to let go of them quickly. That's when you know you have good mindfulness. And then you can train your mindfulness to do things like notice cessation. So it's like you come to sit, you want to be with the breath, there's a grumpy mind state. You know, maybe your husband says something that he always says, or maybe your husband did something that like he never did, you know. Whatever it is that gets you upset. So you're coming and you're sitting. It's okay, there's that familiar mind state. Observe it as it stays for some time and ceases. So rather than feed into it and believe it and grasp it one more time, it's like, okay, there's that mind state, very familiar with that one. Observe it, notice it change. It's almost like the volume comes down a bit. And then there's a moment where it ceases, whatever it is, whatever your mindset is, whatever your reaction is, whatever your thought is, whatever your opinion is. When you come to sit and observe the breath, they all cease. And if you have good mindfulness, you can be aware of the breath while that's kind of going on in the background. But you're also waiting for it to change. And it's like you can say, see, I knew it would change. and then you're waiting for it to cease, and it's like, aha, nirodha, anicca, it ceased. And then if you're with that good mindfulness, you're aware of what the mind feels like when it's not oppressed by one of our habitual reactions or opinions. It's like when it really is with the breath and the reaction's gone, completely gone. What you were upset about for the first 5 minutes, it's not there at all. And this is when the mindfulness begins to get more powerful than our habits. And this is very liberating, and this is very encouraging. And that can be the same for any of the 5 hindrances. So you come and you sit, maybe some craving for, first hindrance, craving not for, second hindrance, maybe some sleepiness, the third hindrance, some anxiousness, some worry, fourth hindrance, some doubts. So it's like you come and you sit, there's some hindrances, that's normal. Well, don't try not to grasp it, notice it change and notice it cease. That's your cittanupassana. That's your dhammanusati. You're aware of an unwholesome object. Giving your attention to the breath, notice it change. Notice it cease when you just stop feeding it. And in terms of like the cultivation of samadhi, many of you have been meditating for a long time, coming and listening to Dhamma talks for a long time, so I'm sure you're very interested in samadhi. Most people want to get jhana. And in my experience of samadhi, even though it's limited, it's not a matter of getting anything. It's a matter of you stop feeding the hindrances and you keep giving the mindfulness to the object, the wholesome meditation object. And at some point the hindrances aren't there at all. And the mind experiences a period of deep peace which isn't moving from that peacefulness. But it didn't get anything. It stopped picking things up. But in order to experience that, you have to have good mindfulness, consistent mindfulness. You have to keep meditating. And if you can increase, recently a lady came to my monastery, she was 80, and she knew many of the disciples of Lumpur Man in northeast Thailand, and she was meditating for 45 minutes a day, morning, afternoon, and evening. I was so happy to meet her because that's the advice I give to my students, and I don't think any of them listen to it. Well, they listen to it, but they don't do it. And so I was so happy to meet her. Oh my God, I'm a Buddha. I met a woman who actually following my advice without me telling her to. So I asked her, could you please be my disciple? Because I want to be able to say at least I've got one who does it, you know. And she said to me, I still don't feel like I'm really getting anywhere, Ajahn. But she said something very interesting. She says, but I have noticed sometimes when I'm not meditating, the Buddha arises and there's just Buddha residing in my mind. And I said, well, that is something. That outside of formal meditation posture, the mind is with a wholesome meditation object. That is progress. She says, but I want to put an end to rebirth, so what can I do? I'm really serious. I don't have long left. What do you recommend? But then she says she has some pain when she sits on the floor. She asked, can she do lying down meditation? What do you think I said? I said, no. Because it normally, I know some great elder monks practice lying down meditation, but they started that after decades of meditating. So if a person has really good mindfulness and they apply it to lying down, that person can practice with lying down meditation. But most people are going to get a bit fuzzy, a bit dreamy, a bit sleepy and fall asleep. So what I did say to her is to sit on the floor as long as she can, have a chair next to herself, and then get up and sit on the chair. Because so many of us do this. You might have more time to meditate, but you sit and it's just too painful. And even your mind might have got peaceful for 10 minutes. And then what people do is like, okay, I've done my meditation. But if you've got the spare time and your mind's beginning to get peaceful, it's really much better to meditate longer. Meditate more. So you have the chair next to you, sit on the floor. Sitting on the floor is important and is helpful because the quality of the mindfulness and the wakefulness tends to be better. And then you sit on the chair. You still keep your back straight, and then you sit for a bit longer. Then the more you are with the wholesome meditation object tends to affect the quality of your mindfulness and how much samadhi you do or don't develop. For myself, a lot of people will know that Ajahn Achalo spends periods of retreat in India at the Bodhi tree. And these days, I was recently there for 3 weeks, and I sat for 3 hours in the morning, 3 hours in the afternoon, 3 hours in the evening, 9 hours a day for 3 weeks. I've done those kind of retreats many times, I think about 18 times. But what I do, because I have a big and heavy Western body, sometimes envious of these nice, slight-framed Asians. I wonder what kind of merit I need to make to be born with a smaller, lighter body. But what I do is I sit for the first 45 minutes, a little watch there, with the right leg on top of the left. At the end of the 45 minutes, I just swap. I put the left leg in front on top of the right. And just in that little action of moving back a little, moving the legs a little, adjusting like that, the pain kind of calms down, and I can sit for another 45 minutes. And then some pain again, and so I will just put into a cross-leg position. Again, just wriggle slightly, and sit for another 45 minutes. So it's possible to keep sitting. And for those of you who want to experience consciousness with no showing, mind where the 4 elements find no footing, the end of samsara, the end of suffering, I encourage you to work with your meditation objects and sit more, because it does work. The biggest problem, I think, or the biggest challenge people have is with not quite doing enough and not quite doing it consistently. So it's like you have the tools, you have the methods, you have the faith, and you're doing it, but we tend to take 1 step forward, 1 step back. And then, not surprisingly, we don't get anywhere. But if we can train ourselves to do a bit more and to be very consistent, suppose you might have a busy period. There's really a lot happening with your life. I still don't recommend stopping. I recommend that, okay, reduce the amount of time. I've got many things to do. I can't sit for an hour and a half. I can sit for 15 minutes. And morning, afternoon, and evening. And when you can increase it again, increase it. Don't give up the habit. We have to grasp at the wholesome first. That's what makes it possible. You need a raft to get to the other shore. You do need to grasp to the raft. It's not yet time to say, I don't need a raft. You will drown. So part of the raft that leads to the other shore, your dana, your sila, your meditation practices, and then we need to grasp at those skillfully, understanding that that's the conditions that will take us to the unconditioned, and do as much as you possibly can. So I offer that for your reflection. I hope something I said might have been helpful to you. And I also give people a chance to ask questions, if you have any.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you, Ajahn Achalo, for the insightful teaching. We shall now open the floor for questions and answers. Brothers and sisters, please mindfully raise your hands and wait for us to bring you the mic before asking any questions. Does anyone have any questions?
Anyone want to meditate for 45 more minutes?
Good evening. Apologize, I just arrived actually, so I missed most of the talk. I came after my work.
Okay.
So I'll ask a question that is not from the talk itself. I had a question earlier about study versus practice. And I know this is a common question, I guess it gets asked a lot. I guess it relates to the final part of your sharing that you talk about knowing when is the right time to hold on, and for the moment, you might need to hold on rather than let go first. I guess my question is more like, sorry, let me catch my breath a little bit. My question is more like, when we study the Dhamma, when we look at certain suttas or maybe Abhidhamma concepts, there might be some concepts or some teachings that might not apply yet, or might not apply directly yet. And so for some of those concepts, it might be theory at first.
Right.
And so I guess my question is, how much of that do we need to, how much of the not yet applied, I guess, concepts do we need to hold on to for now? And if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is a theme or an issue that comes up even in different Buddhist traditions. So and even like someone like His Holiness the Dalai Lama, so with the tradition of studying for 12 or 14 or 16 years to be a geshe, that's how extreme it can become. And he says, there are so many delusions. This is why you need so much wisdom to counter all the delusions. So 16 years of study, not much meditation yet. And then you've got Ajahn Achalo in the Western monks for the rainy season. He said, give me your books, lock them in the cupboard, no reading at all. And then in the Tibetan tradition, you have, 3 years, 3 months, 3 days, off to your cave. So we have this phenomenon. I think, obviously, some people are more academic or intellectual in their nature. And if it is your character that you're going to be thinking a lot anyway, or you're going to be studying something, then better to study the Dhamma, right? But for myself, coming from the practice tradition, I feel that the three cardinal suttas, so the Dhammacakka Sutta, Eightfold Path, Four Noble Truths, the way to contemplate anatta, of the mind-body phenomenon, in the Anatta Lakkhana Sutta, the Aditta Pariyaya Sutta, the third sermon about the dukkha characteristic of grasping at this, those three, plus the Anapanasati Sutta, the Four Foundations of Mindfulness Sutta, and the Metta Sutta, 6 suttas, I personally feel is enough. I personally feel you have everything you need there to liberate your mind, if that's what you really want to do. But people are attached to thinking, and people do think a lot, and people do like to speculate. So I guess it's a matter of, what's the middle way with it? So in terms of like studying things which don't quite seem relevant to you, that you think you might need to grasp on for the future, I wouldn't recommend that. I would generally recommend something that seems relevant to now. And particularly with the Abhidhamma. I don't want to get in trouble with the Abhidhamma scholars, but I think it's good to, because they can be really mean, those Abhidhamma scholars. No, I'm speaking from experience. Basically, if Lord Buddha gave a set of teachings to beings in heaven, they have a different experience of the 5 khandhas to us. And he was speaking to beings with, subtle faculties. And so for myself, I wouldn't make the assumption that the teachings that the Buddha gave to the devas in heaven are relevant to me necessarily. I would assume that the Dharma discourses that were taught to human beings are going to be the most applicable. So, and then the ones which are particularly addressed to practitioners with regards to how to liberate their mind, if that's what you're interested in. Because the suttas contain an enormous amount of information, how to run businesses, how to run a family, all sorts of things, advice for kings. But if you want to get out of samsara, those ones particularly related to practice, that end with the verse, and at the end of the teaching, so and so is liberated. Those are the ones that personally I find very interesting. And,
I have a follow-up. I
Sure.
recalled something to add.
Yeah.
So something interesting that I found, at least from my own experience, this sometimes surprises me, sometimes not, is we don't know. Sometimes we don't know that teaching is applicable or relevant,
Right.
and it's sometimes surprising when it does become relevant. So sometimes you have learned this sutta in the back of your head, and then you don't think about it much, and then when you encounter something, it comes to your mind. Oh, actually, this sutta applies very well in this situation. So this is something I find from experience, and when I do encounter such situations, of course, I guess I'm pleasantly surprised. Wow, how comprehensive, how profound the Dharma could be.
Yeah.
And then that background study helps to bring to mind something that's useful for the situation. So this sometimes happens, and I guess that's something from experience that I find interesting.
So the question I have for you now then is, do you have a daily formal sitting practice?
Working on it.
See? Because, Dhamma Vichaya is one of the 7 factors of enlightenment, okay? So it's wholesome. But it's, in the 7 factors of enlightenment, another wonderful list, right? Sati, Samadhi. So, too much discursive thinking tends to mean weak sati and not much samadhi. So you can have a lot of wholesome thoughts, it's a skillful speculation, but even what you're saying when you meet with this challenge in life is after the fact. Oh yeah, that teaching the Buddha said seems to apply to this. The way I understand Lord Buddha's teachings, the purpose of them, they're a map. They're not the journey. So you can look at every map on Google Maps. It's not going to tell you your next footstep, right? And what I personally think we need to be looking at is, where am I now? What's my journey? What's the next step? What's the step after that? And when you come to a crossroads or a point where the path isn't clear, then you might want to look at some other maps, right? But the basic map is you should be meditating daily. Samma sati, samma samadhi. And when we don't yet have much experience of a peaceful mind, we don't understand the value of it, because we haven't experienced it much yet. When you do having some experience of a peaceful mind, I don't know, for myself there's just always such a feeling of relief, that when the mind is able to put down thoughts, it's just this, and then however long the mind stays peaceful, delicious tranquility, rapture, serenity, deep feeling of contentedness and peace. When the mind moves from that and starts to think, there's always such gratitude for the beauty of a peaceful mind. And so naturally for myself, I hold that quite high as a Dhamma worth pursuing. But I'm coming from the meditation tradition, so we are supposed to put an emphasis on formal meditation. And I can only say from my 30 years of my own meditation experiences that I probably think 30% of what I used to. So I have 70% less noise in my mind. And once a fortnight I answer questions on Zoom, and I sometimes before I do it, there's a part of me that's kind of like, oh God, I have to do all that thinking and all that speaking. It's like there's a bunch of threads, and I'll have to pick them all up and weave them into a design that people can understand. But we've been meditation monks. We've trained ourselves to just leave the threads as threads, right? And a thought is a thought, a feeling is a feeling. Don't have to make a big story. But obviously it's valuable to answer people's Dhamma questions and to be able to know how to use thoughts. So now, my own experience now is like, I can think, or not, a lot of the time. And if I want to think, I can think in a focused direction about what I want to think about. So that, to me, is the value of mindfulness and concentration with Samma Sankappa, right thought. It's when they're balanced, it's like, okay, I can use thought now. I can use speech. I'm not. Sometimes there can be a negative reaction or some neurosis. I'm not completely beyond distractive thoughts. But in general, compared to 30 years ago, there's a lot more dexterity around and focus around using thought. And then one of the value of why I'm trying to encourage people to meditate morning, afternoon, and evening is like, it was such a challenge as a junior monk to be with the meditation object. So much restlessness and so much like, just to give you an example, because it's nice to have something to compare to. When I was a novice at Wat Nanachat, I used to jump over the back wall and go for a jog. It was just right. The only people that saw me were the buffaloes. You can't do it now because there's houses there, but there wasn't then. I was 23, right? Oh, just jump over the wall. No shoes, no inner clothing. Painful actually, but just to get the restlessness out, you know. And then, okay, jump back over the wall. Okay, go to the evening chanting. And so there was a lot of restlessness, a lot of energy. That's normal for a young man, right? And painful thoughts and fantasies, what you want to do, what you don't want to do, why you're angry at him, why you're offended, why you're hurt. It's so painful to have to be with it, without distraction. But now, generally speaking, because I meditate every morning, every afternoon, every evening, every day for a long time, now when I wake up in the morning, I'm aware of my first in-breath, without trying. And when I go to the bathroom, even if I'm half asleep and a bit groggy, I can feel the feelings at the bottom of my feet. Because of all of the sessions of walking meditation, all of the sessions of breath meditation, all of the come back to the object, come back to the object, come back to the object. Now the mind is vaguely with the object most of the time and more with the object in formal meditation, but the object never gets too far away. But that result only comes comes from the consistency. So if you want an extraordinary result, you do have to sow an extraordinary cause. And I'm so grateful now. I can see the benefit of all that effort. Oh wow, it actually really does work. The mind is more trained now, more malleable. But if we don't get around to training it to be with the breath, for example, or a wholesome meditation object, the thoughts will... I suppose if a person is on a great disciple path, like if you want to be Sariputta, I don't know what your personal aspiration is, but if you want to be a chief disciple equal to wisdom as a Buddha, then maybe what you're saying is, can I study these dhammas so that they might be relevant in the future? Okay, Sariputta. I think that's also what the Tibetan monks are doing when they study for 18 years. I once attended the Dalai Lama's teachings, and he was talking about qualities that bodhisattvas need to develop. One of them is extraordinary intelligence. I think in the Pali it would be the analytical knowledges. So if you want to be the Arahant with the analytical knowledges and the miracle of teaching, okay, you study the whole Pitaka. You do need to understand that you are adding a few more thousand lives to your path before you get liberated. So we have to think it through. Now, if you want to be a chief disciple of Buddha, equal in wisdom to the Buddha, sadhu. If you want to be an Arahant with analytical knowledge, the miracle of teaching, sadhu. Go ahead. But if you're feeling a bit weary and you think it might be nice to be liberated from samsara, then you need your samma sati, samma samadhi, and you need your meditation. So,
dexterity is a great word.
Right.
Sadhu Pati. Thank you.
Thank you for the sharing tonight, Ajahn.
You're welcome.
So I basically found out something that's really relevant to the current struggles that I'm going through, and that's basically on emotional regulation. And I think most of the time when we're feeling angry, when things are not good, we tend to react a lot faster than we actually respond to the situation. For example, when we're really angry and we're in pain, we're in a lot of frustration and we can't take it anymore. So the first thing that we do and that I tend to do a lot is to lash out my anger by yelling at people and probably even resorting things with violence. And from the realization of that is that there are the short-term benefits but long-term consequences in which you can feel comfortable for a short period of time. So like taking one step forward, and in the long term, you're actually going two steps backwards because after a while you have this sense of regret that I shouldn't have done this and it was so stupid of me to do this by yelling out of nowhere and by resorting things into violence, and I'm actually digging myself an even deeper hole. And I believe my question for tonight would be, are there any ways that you can train your mindfulness so that you can let your anger go and moving on without resorting things with anger and with aggression and violence?
Yes. So we have the three root kilesas, the greed, the hatred, and the delusion. Generally speaking, different beings will have more of one. So, and the Buddha explains that if you have more greed, for example, you're supposed to do more body contemplation, the nature of the body, and also having a look at what he described as the loathsome aspect of the body. So for people who are obsessed with smooth, beautiful skin or lovely hair, or shapes, then Lord Buddha is suggesting you need to think about the blood and the bones and the excrement and the pus, and the other things that are also there. For people who have a lot of anger and aversion, he prescribes loving kindness meditation. So it's like, and the thing is, if we have a lot of anything, then we need to apply a lot of the antidote. The problem is, greed types tend to not like body contemplation, and aversion types tend to not like loving kindness metta meditation. And this is where we have to trust Lord Buddha. He's the doctor, you have an ailment, and he's saying this is the medicine. So we have to take the medicine. So if you know you have this deep tendency to anger, then when you come to do your daily meditation, you have to do 10 or 15 minutes of loving kindness meditation at the beginning of the meditation. So and if you come and you sit there and you're feeling some remorse about something you did last night or yesterday or last week, right in that moment, you're a being who has suffering. So you have to start with that. May I be well, may I be happy. May I be well, may I be happy. And you just do that until that feeling goes away. And then you include other people. We normally start with someone for whom it's easy to feel loving kindness towards, a parent or a teacher or a mentor who we actually like. We bring that person to mind, but once again, breathing in, may I be well, breathing out, may that person be well, breathing in, may I be well, breathing out, may that person be well. And then you should notice that when your mind is having those thoughts of loving kindness, that aversion is not present in that moment. And this is like chinks in the armor. It's like periods of time where there isn't irritation and aversion. Periods of time where the antidote is present instead. And then what also tends to happen, Luang Por Anand, my main teacher in Thailand, he does recommend cultivating loving kindness as a support to the development of mindfulness, because what happens is once your mind becomes a bit more sensitized to kindness, tenderness, gentleness, is you'll notice the angry thought faster, because it's very different. If we're habituated to it and it's very frequent in our mind, we might not notice it until afterwards. But if you have the experience of a different mind state for periods of time, then you'll notice when it's beginning, and then hopefully you might need other tools. If you go to anger management classes, like some things as like skillful distraction, or just leave the house, go for a jog, or many things. Go to another room, count to 10. You're still angry, go for a walk. It's like separate yourself from the thing that you're reacting to. There are various skills that you can develop. But loving kindness meditation is very powerful. But we, like anything, we have to be diligent and disciplined and consistent with it, and then it becomes truly powerful. So if we only do it sometimes, the anger is going to be more powerful. But you have the tool, you have the hardware, you have the software. I'm giving you the package free. Download it, upload it, but then you have to do it. Yeah. And sometimes we don't want to sit because we don't. A lot of modern people have self-aversion, ill will, self-loathing. We don't want to sit because we hate ourselves. We don't want to sit because it's painful. And but we can actually do something about that. We can decide to care, and we can decide to not do that. That's not a skillful response. So we have to decide to care and forgive the past, start again in each new moment. It's a process. But yes, frequent loving kindness meditation.
Thank you, Ajahn.
You're welcome.
All right, thank you very much, Ajahn. Would Ajahn be open to taking one more last question from the floor? Okay, maybe one last question.
Good evening, Bante. My question is, how do you prepare to die, especially the moment you're dying?
Yeah, okay.
And when I've read books that say that Lord Buddha went from first jhana up to 9 arupa jhana, came back to first and then fourth. But we are lay people.
Right.
Thank you.
Yes, and he was an arahant. So there was already a part of his mind established in Nibbana. So the best way to die mindfully is to have lived a mindful life. So it's like you're not going to be able to get it together in your last moments if you haven't been putting some effort into getting it together before that. So just what I'm saying, the frequent and consistent practice with meditation objects, establishing a quality of mindfulness that sees the body as a body, feelings as feelings, so that when during the dying process, that's
We
the
just
body.
do the work as it is. Be here and now.
That's right. But supported with hopefully some samadhi.
What happens when you are around people who don't have Dharma? They do not know what to do. In the Tibetan Book of Death, they actually place the dying person 3 days in a quiet room and they serve food outside the room. That's what I read in the book. You know.
But you should be surrounded by nice Buddhas. You have a whole room full of them, isn't it?
Not every member of my family is
not at
practicing
home.
Dharma.
Yeah. So I think you have to tell people how you want to die. You have to lay down the law. It's my death. As I said to my father when I was 14 years old and he was telling me what subjects to study in high school, I said, it's my life. And I guess now it's my death coming up next. But you tell people that I remember I was helping one lady to die mindfully in Singapore. One of her friends is here. And she was such a lovely lady. All of her sisters and all of her friends loved her so much. She was dying of cancer. But they were all coming in and holding her and crying. Oh, I love you so much. Oh, I'm going to miss you. And because I was invited by the family to be there, I felt I had permission to be there. So I actually scolded them. I said, I don't scold people very much, only if I care for them. So anyway, I cared for this lady. And I said to her, you love her because she was a kind person, she was a generous person, and she supported you, she was there for you in various ways. This is not the way to show your gratitude to her, filling her with your selfish sadness. Now is your time to give her good energy. So you need to cry fine, outside. Don't you dare cry in front of her. You come in here, you meditate, you chant, you wish her well, you dedicate merit to her. When you feel sad and feel sorry for yourself, you go outside. And they did. And then we started having a morning chanting session, an afternoon chanting session, an evening chanting session. And this lady, she could still move her eyelids, she couldn't do anything else. And I actually had a bit of a sense that she wanted some quiet time. And I asked her, do you want your relatives to chant for you? And she was like, and I said she would like some quiet time. And the relative says, no, we're going to chant. And I had to say to her, I'm sorry. But they needed to do something skillful. And then after that chanting session, she did pass away peacefully. And I believe she was, according to some people that I can consult, she was born as a deva. So yeah, sometimes you have to set boundaries, you know. What would be helpful around you, what won't be helpful around you. And there is a thing called a living will. Like you can write in your will certain parameters around what to do when you're dying. But you also have to let people know that you have that living will. So that can include things like not non-resuscitation or not intubating, not putting tubes. But this is an individual person's choice. You have a choice to say that should you not be able to speak for yourself anymore, you already decided. If you can't get out of the bed, if you can't chew by yourself, if you can't speak for yourself, you already wrote that you don't want them to stick a tube up your nose and keep feeding you. But that's something each person has to take responsibility for before they get to that point. Hopefully it doesn't get to that point. But for many people it does. And then the people around you, well, what do we do? They tend to want to keep you alive as long as possible. And that's not necessarily the best thing for the mind. So we have to tell people, we have to be brave enough to say, when we get to that point, this is what I want, this is what I don't want. And when the villagers are passing away in the village where I go for alms round, I start visiting them. They often die at home, the villagers in Thailand. And I will visit them after my alms round. We chant for them, remind them of their putting food in the bowl, katinas, various good things they did. And then I ask the relatives to play Dhamma talks, play chanting, and try to prepare them a little bit before they go. But for those people, they would hate to be locked in a room and be alone. So for them, because they've grown up in a village, a very porous social situation where other people's kids are coming over and everyone attends everyone else's events and everybody knows everyone's business, they actually want people around. They would feel very lonely and abandoned without that. So it really depends on, you need to put some thought into how do you want to die. If you want to be left alone for those last 3 days, that's fine. I want to die in meditation posture. I actually told Ajahn Achalo, a monk at my monastery, if I was too weak to do that he can tie me to a post, I said. Put me in meditation posture, tie me to a post, tie my forehead to it. And I told them, don't feed, don't put tubes, leave the room, let me die. And I said, but please don't let the ants eat me while I'm dying. That's my one request, because age is a lot of ants, right? So I gave you permission to come in and sweep the ants away from me, and let me die. And he says, can your disciples come and pay respects? I said, no, just let me die peacefully at that time. So I told the monks at my monastery what I want. So.
Lucky you.
Yeah.
All right, thank you very much, brothers and sisters, for your questions. And thank you, Ajahn, for clarifying our doubts and answering our questions. Let us offer 3 resounding sadhus again to Venerable Ajahn Achalo. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.